All right, welcome everybody. My name is Sam Renaud. I am one of the co-founders and on the board of directors of Sports Biz Camps. I want to thank everybody for being here today. We're really excited to be joined by several members of Riot Games. Today's pathway is the esports industry. And I would also like to introduce Gregg Blankenberg, who is our locker room leader here. Gregg, you want to give a quick intro on yourself?
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Gregg Blankenberg. I'm a former attendee of Sports Biz Camp. I've been listening to Pat Stack, the co-founder of Sports Biz Camp, as well as Jeff Longa for a few years now. I am a senior in high school in Carmel Christian in Matthews, North Carolina, and I play varsity baseball.
Appreciate that. So before we get into the panelists introducing yourselves, a few bits of housekeeping for all of you campers. Remember, the panelists are not going to be able to see you. If you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A at the bottom. Feel free to chat in the chat panel as well if you want to just keep some dialogue going. We're going to try to get to everybody's questions as best we can. Every 7 or so minutes, Griggs is going to filter some of your questions that are coming through and ask the panelists. We probably won't be able to get to everybody. We appreciate your patience on that, and there'll probably be some opportunity to email questions later on if we can't answer them here live. Remember to stay tuned into the Career Exploration Pass program. There are prizes and money available to you guys at the end of this if you guys are our top performers. And without further ado, Chris, let's start with you.
Awesome. Hey everybody, my name is Chris Greeley. I grew up in northern New Jersey. I went to college at Franklin and Marshall in Pennsylvania. I went to law school right out of college. I went to Fordham Law in New York. I was a lawyer for 12 or 13 years in New York before I joined Riot at the end of 2016. And then currently at Riot, I run the day-to-day business operations of the League Championship Series, or the LCS. The LCS is the North American Professional League for play of the game League of Legends, which is published by Riot Games. And then we'll get in a little bit more about how I got there, but I think that's a good start. I'll throw it over to Dave. Dave, you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi campers. My name is Dave Stewart. I am the executive producer and the head of the broadcast and content teams here in North America for Riot Games. That means we do the broadcast for the LCS and any other esports that we do. I'm from California. I grew up in Northern California and came down to Los Angeles to go to school at UCLA many years ago. And then after that, I started my career as a school teacher in the inner city here in Los Angeles, and eventually got into sports and sports production, where I was an intern here at ABC7 before getting some jobs at Fox Sports and working in the sports department there for several years, producing shows about national sports coverage. Later transitioned into entertainment and did a lot of comedy and comedy festival work and entertainment content for Warner Brothers. And then in 2013, I came to Riot Games and began working with the broadcast teams for esports at that time. And have been able to produce a lot of broadcasts and events at big sporting events around the country and around the world for Riot. And it's been quite a fun adventure. Zach, you want to go next?
Sure. Hey everyone, so my name is Zack, and I do player management for the LCS as part of the league management team. So player management is basically about the pro player experience. Everything that I do relates to the competitors we have in our league, all of the people who get paid to play League of Legends professionally. So a lot of my work is around it's pretty wide ranging, but basically everything from the pathway to pro up until the day-to-day experience on show match days for our pros, as well as some long-term initiatives around how to build up their brands and make sure that fans are having fun watching them on stage. In terms of my pathway, Riot Games was actually my first full-time job out of college. So I went to UC San Diego for psychology. And then I actually ended up as an intern at Riot. And then afterwards, I guess they liked me well enough because I got to come back full time and do player management.
Perfect.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Gregg, want to kick it over to you?
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Gregg Travitz. I work with all these awesome people on the LCS as well. My role is managing relationships with sponsors and partners. So I work on the business development team. I actually used to work with Zack on player management, and about 2 years ago moved over to the business development team. So Riot is a place where people move around a lot and end up in different roles. I grew up in central Pennsylvania on the East Coast. I went to a school that you most likely have never heard of called Millersville University of Pennsylvania in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Lancaster, I guess, if you're from California, which is actually right down the street from where Chris Greeley went to school, which is interesting. And I graduated from school there and just kind of fell into a job selling orthopedic medical sales equipment for sports medicine, which if y'all are here for sports, that's a really cool field if you're ever interested in getting into it. It wasn't for me, but it is fascinating field. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, it's really, really interesting. And I never knew it existed before I left that industry, or before I got into that industry. And then I ended up in esports. So I'm sure we'll talk about that when we get there. But yeah, pass it over to Tone.
Cool. My name's Tone Hoeft. I'm the publishing lead for Valorant in North America, which just means that I work on marketing. Prior to that, I did the same thing on the LCS with esports with all of these folks, and these are all really great people. I went to a tiny school. I grew up in Minnesota, went to a tiny college in Minnesota called North Central University. And then after that, I did a year of grad school and then moved to Los Angeles, where I started my career working in entertainment. I wrote and produced a lot of random things like commercials, a lot of stuff for ESPN, live TV award shows, and like indie features. And then I transitioned into working into marketing, where I worked at an ad agency for like 3 or 4 years. During that time, I got to work on some really cool stuff. Like I worked on campaigns for Lego, helped launch a bunch of games with Ubisoft, work on some stuff for GoPro. And then Riot was nice enough to employ me and invite me over. And so then I joined Riot working on esports, where I worked on marketing before joining the Valorant folks. But it's been a fun journey, and it's a great group of people here.
We appreciate it. You guys all have some really interesting backgrounds, and it's fun to see as we go through all these panels and as we try to give some advice to young people, just how many different ways there are to reach your goals. And that being said, sometimes you don't even know what your goals are as you're working toward them. So you have these circuitous paths. So Chris, I want to come back to you, and then we'll kind of go around the table. Formative moments in your past. Let's go all the way back to high school. What did you think about back then? What did you think you want to do, and what were you doing at that time to prepare yourself?
Yeah, when I was in, maybe even as far back as elementary school, I was going to be a computer programmer. I played a ton of video games growing up, and always envisioned that one day I would be making those games. But there's no path for that was available to me when I was in high school, and like I didn't know where to go, and like no one in my family had gone to college, so I didn't know how to pick a college. I didn't know how to look for majors. So I eventually wound up at Franklin and Marshall in Lancaster, down the road from Gregg, although probably 10 years. I was probably gone for 10 years before he started college. But they offered me scholarship money, and it was something that my family needed for me to go to college. So without thoughts of majors or careers, I took the money and jumped into it because it was my opportunity for college. When I got there, it was probably a sophomore or junior in college, and all of my friends were starting to put resumes together and think about internships and think about jobs. And that stuff sounded really scary. Like I wasn't ready to work. I was 20 years old, 19 years old. So I had done some stuff in high school around mock trial, and had some teachers in my school who were former lawyers who had quit to come and be teachers at my high school. And it gave me the idea that I liked all that stuff. Maybe I would just go to law school. It prolonged having to go out into the workplace for 3 years. And then at the end of it, you didn't have to figure out, do I want to go work in an office? Do I want to go build houses? At the end of the day, you had a law degree and you looked for law jobs. And for me, it was about helping to narrow down kind of what the end goal was. I didn't know what kind of lawyer I wanted to be and ultimately what I wanted to do with a law degree. But for me, it was trying to find ways to narrow down all the choices that were out there, especially because I just didn't know what kind of careers existed.
I think that's a really important piece of this right now, especially at a young age, figuring out just what exactly you're wired to do. And I know I can speak from experience and say I went down the wrong path for a while. I worked as a sports agent for almost 7 years, and I was not cut out for that world. It just didn't fit me. Tone, I'll bring you in. Talk about kind of the skills that you bring to the table. You've done some really interesting stuff in a lot of different areas too. So I'll kind of pose the same question to you. What got you here? Kind of what were you thinking about? What was your ultimate goal, and where are you on that journey?
Yeah, I think the thing that most people get really stressed about, and I remember feeling also really stressed about this in high school, was that I felt like I had to know exactly what I wanted to do. Like a lot of my friends knew exactly what they were like. I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a writer. And I just wanted to work and grow up and do things, right? Like I wasn't really sure. And so, I think the best like advice that I can give when I think through all that is just kind of just chase the things that interest you and try to learn. And even if you don't know exactly what you want to do, that's totally fine. Because I didn't. I went to school for youth development, and I worked as like a high school counselor for a little bit. And then I went to grad school for communications because that didn't work for me. And then when I moved out here, I worked in entertainment because I was still lost and I still had no idea what I was doing. But kind of the thing that I continued to do through a lot of that is just to try to chase down the things in front of me and try to learn as much as I can into whatever I was kind of throwing myself into. And when I look at like what I'm doing now, when I do like marketing for like Valorant, it's like all the things that I've learned over time have made me who I am and made me like able to do a job that I'm doing, right? Even like learning like youth psychology and developmental psychology, right? A lot of that work goes into now like talking about like how do we actually position the product and how do we talk about the product to people. Same way we're doing that for esports, right? But if you were going to ask me back when I was doing that, if I would ever work in marketing or if I'd ever like tell stories in that way, I would have never predicted that, right? And so if you have a dream, I think that's great, chase after it. But if you're not sure and you just kind of have a general space, I think it's also cool to just keep trying with whatever's in front of you and be open to like where that takes you.
That's great. In just a minute, I'm going to come over to you, Dave, and then Gregg, we'll have you take a question because I see a couple coming through here. Dave, you've bounced around between comedy and entertainment and sports and now in esports. You answer the same question, kind of what was your journey like? What did you initially think you were going to do back as a high school student, and what changed your mind?
Yeah, I think for me, the journey was always with stories and storytelling. I studied English and English literature when I went to school, and I always enjoyed writing and wanted to write. And then I got into teaching writing, and I was, teaching English and journalism and drama at an inner city school here in Los Angeles. But it was always about storytelling, and I always had a deep love of sports and kind of the stories that go into the sports, kind of the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat and all the in-betweens, that kind of make up the stories that I've always loved to listen to and to be a part of and to celebrate. And so as that, journey progressed and as I kind of took the steps to get into sports production, it was really with the storytelling basis and really it started as a writer. And then with that, like I got a job even while teaching at Fox Sports as a writer on some of their Fox Sports News and the National Sports Report were the shows at the time that were comparable to ESPN Sports Center. And so it was like, 5 hours of live news shows a day, every day, 365 days a year. And it's just constant storytelling and like, what's the best angle to talk about a certain game or a certain moment in a game, or what is the most interesting thing that is going to be compelling for an audience. And so really it started with a love of listening to stories and celebrating sports stories and listening to announcers and what made them different, whether it's play-by-plays or color commentators or analysts, and really then kind of learning the craft through some some really valuable experiences both at Fox Sports and elsewhere about what the basics of storytelling are. And we always go to editorially appropriate. I saw one of the questions in the chat just about how you decide what tone to set for stories. We always default to what's editorially appropriate, and that can change. There are times when a game, we call them clown fiestas, where a game is really sloppy and crazy, but it can be really fun, and that's a great opportunity to have fun and celebrate the laughter in our sports. And then there are other games that are highly pivotal. Championships depend on them, and it's a time for gravity, and at those times, our approach becomes much more serious and much more just the gravity of the situation and the intensity of the moment is where we really want to live and play. But yeah, for me, it's always been storytelling, and that's one thing that I really have loved learning, is that people playing video games can express all of the great characteristics that make competition of all kinds relevant to audiences. Is that person playing a video game can be courageous, and like it sounds so foreign like to certain concepts, but it requires bravery to commit to a play and know that you may look like you may look bad if you fail in something and your teammates are relying on you. And seeing players go in and commit to making a play at the risk of failing and at the risk of looking bad and at the risk of embarrassing themselves are things that I really love watching and resonate strongly with me in our storytelling and in the sports that we've all loved to work with and build over the last few years.
That's great. I think I'm going to have Gregg bring a question in for us, but I want to come back to storytelling and talk to you guys all about that as well once he's done. So Gregg, what do you have for us?
I think one answer. Do you want to answer that live, or did you answer it in the chat and text about marketing Valorant?
Sorry, yeah, I was trying to type the answer and then I hit answer live. So it's just me not knowing how to use the thing. So that's my bad. I think we can try to keep the questions focused on sports marketing or however people want to go. I didn't want to monopolize it with Valorant, but like the really quick answer to that question, and I answered it in text, is that, we think that there's room for, like, the nice thing about like FPS games is that, like, unlike League of Legends, where it's like League of Legends is the monster in the room and that's kind of it, with like FPS titles, like many people play more than one, right? And that's like the goal with Valorant, is to like try to be one of those titles that you're like cycling into like other shooter games that you have.
And FPS is first person shooter.
Sorry. Yes.
Gregg, you want to do one more and then we'll go back into
Sure. This is from a camper in the chat named Essen. Her question is, I heard one of you say earlier that you became an intern at Riot. How did you find that opportunity, and how could others get in an internship at a company they like?
Cool. Yeah, that was me. So I sort of fell into the internship, which sounds kind of weird, but like I love telling the story of how I got it, because I think for me it was like a really important learning about like how to think about how I spend my time doing things and like appreciating the stuff that I did. So in college, I just liked playing video games. And so just out of natural interest in wanting to meet like-minded individuals, I ended up joining a lot of the video game clubs on campus. Triton Gaming was the specific club, if anyone's familiar with UCSD. And then I ended up just getting super involved in the club because it was just fun, and like I enjoyed that a lot. And like I was kind of curious what sort of like internships were out there in the gaming industry, so I ended up just applying to a couple, like specifically at Riot I was really interested in, and then went through the process. They post the internships online. Basically at the end of it, they were like, oh cool, like you have all of this like really good esports experience, and I was basically like, what? And then it turns out it's like working for like doing a lot of collegiate esports club type stuff was basically very similar to the work I'm doing now. So I guess all that to say that like don't undervalue how you spend your free time, and like just because you're not in a academic class, like you're still learning a lot of valuable things, and you can potentially apply those things to a job. It's just about trying to reframe like how you think about how you're spending your time. So that's, I think, how I ended up getting the internship.
And those internships are for Riot. There's a program that we run every year, and there's we put it up on the website. There's an open application period, and then a structured internship program. And I know there are a lot of companies out there that run similar programs on those kind of timelines.
The one thing I'd add to that, just from experience at other places and internships, there may be some internships that are wide open, but typically they're associated with being a student somewhere. And so like having that focus on education as a companion piece to the internship is probably a pretty good ticket to getting your foot in the door somewhere, is that you either are getting college credits or and see even some of the ones that are paid internships still need to have a component of education. So it's something to consider as you're choosing your kind of education path and your career path.
I think there's a theme that we'll continue to hear through all these panels, in that you've got to find a way to differentiate yourself and step out and do more than just the bare minimum, do more than just what's expected. And Gregg, I'm going to come over to you just because you haven't spoken yet. Give us the same story. Talk about kind of how did you set yourself apart and how have you gotten where you are now?
Yeah. So like I said, I went to school in central Pennsylvania and then ended up getting a job in medical sales. And what's interesting is that like in some very strange, weird way, that medical sales job actually ended up helping me get my foot in the door at Riot. In between the medical sales job and Riot, I got a job in esports. I worked with a bunch of people who literally just liked playing League of Legends and like creating content for it. And so I was doing some like business development work for that community organization. And then that community organization ended up getting bought out by a company in California because it was worth something to them. In hindsight, probably not the best business decision, but that's the way it goes. And during that time, I was interviewing at Riot. And I would say there's a couple different ways I differentiated myself. One was I interviewed at Riot for 18 straight months. I got denied 5 times from Riot. And I interviewed for 6 different positions. I got the 6th one, hence I got denied 5 times. And I just kind of never stopped coming back. I mean, I wasn't told to go away, so that helped. I wouldn't recommend like not listening to the recruiter or whatever if that happens. So like make sure you're paying attention there. But you know, the thing that kind of got me in the door was being able to speak to that experience outside of the industry. And so I was able to you know, speak to, okay, I have done some things completely unrelated to esports, business development, being able to sell something that I had no formal education in. Example, medical sales. I went to school for the most general business management degree at a state school that was not super well known that you can possibly have, but then essentially went into that medical sales job, did that for 2 years, gained a lot of experience outside of what I was used to doing. And then when I started interviewing at Riot, there was a lot of interest in me for that specific position because I had done I worked in surgical centers. I had been in the operating room. I had done all this stuff, and and it was like, well, I have no medical degree, so that was interesting and something I could speak to of how I learned something new immediately on the job. And so while that had literally no direct connection to esports, it was something I was able to speak to in my past experience. And then I had done a lot of work outside of my current job in that medical sales role, working with that esports organization, helping to get that organization bought out by another company, working as business development in that specific role, and that rolled into finally 18 months later, after having moved to California, getting that job at Riot. So, you know, what you'll find in this panel is that none of us took the same path to get someplace. Mine was very non-traditional. And so I think the best thing you can do is try to get yourself to be well-rounded, and really to speak to what Zack had said before, you never know what specific thing you are doing. Sorry, I'm going to rephrase that. You never know what thing you are learning or what thing you are doing you'll be able to speak to when you go to actually do something else. So, you know, who knew that medical sales was going to be one of the things that helped me get a job in the industry that I loved and wanted to be a part of. So yeah, just to plus one meaning like to say essentially what Zack said, you never know, and you should always just try to give 100%, even if it's something you think you'll never do again in your life.
So is anybody on this panel on the other side of the table for these interviews?
I was here before Greeley, so no. I was here before Zack. I don't think I interviewed with Tone. And Dave, I don't think I interviewed with you either, so no. So none of you declined me, thank
How
goodness.
did you get through? Yeah.
Yeah, right. I don't know. Technically, actually, Winston, the guy who became my manager, had like broken his back at the time, so I didn't even interview with Winston. So yeah, I don't know how I got through. So I got lucky, I guess.
That's good. I was going to ask what it took and kind of what your mindset was, and then hopefully get somebody else's feedback on the other side of the table here. But I don't have anybody who was there.
Yeah, it was like one of the hard. It was really, really hard. I mean, every single time, like this was my dream job too. Like I don't think I mentioned that, but like working at Riot was my dream job. I had wanted to work in esports, specifically in League of Legends, for a long time, and every time I would get declined, my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, like there were a lot of really low moments, and she helped me get through a lot of that. But it was really tough, honestly. And just to speak really candidly, it's really, really hard to get declined for something that is your dream job. But I think the key is to just like, set up that support structure around you, make sure that you're like prepared for that and know what your plan is after that happens. And if it is literally just being like, I'm going to beat my head against that wall as many times as I can until I get through, that can be a strategy. Just make sure you do it with like poise and like with intention, and not just like hounding people over and over again.
Just a quick follow-up on that, because I think I've been with Riot the longest, and I've done several hundred interviews in my time with Riot. I find that I'm on panels a lot, and the interview process at Riot is really challenging. You'll go in and you'll interview with 6 different people a half an hour or an hour at a time, and it's an all-day thing. And one thing that I just want to like tell to people who will be dealing with interviews along the way is like, there's no faking it. You can't like cheat on a test or fake it or pretend that you're interested. You should be applying for jobs that you are passionate about, that you are interested in, where having a conversation 6 times in a row with different aspects does not feel like you're running out of things to say, because really that's our day-to-day job once you're in, is having conversations about these same subjects all day long. And it should be a passion point. It should be something that you love. It should be something that you're interested in doing, because that way they're provocative conversations, and maybe in one conversation you learn something that may be valuable in your next conversation, or even teach the person who's interviewing you something about the way that they look at a problem. But you can't, there's no substitute for being passionate about the subject matter or area that you are hoping to work in.
I think it's a great point. There's an interesting, as you go through and talk to people who are in charge of hiring, the passion is so important, but you've got to be able to demonstrate it in a way where you show that you understand the business and you're not just a fan. You can't walk in and say, and Gregg, I'm not calling you out on this, but to come in and say, it's my dream to work for Riot Games, that's all I care about, I'm going to apply to every position at this company until I get one, is not typically the path, because you've got to show a true interest in the work, the business side of it.
Yeah, and I think that that's actually a really key point you make, which is like, a lot of people think, oh, I want to work in X industry, so I should get degree in X thing. So I want to work in esports, so I need to get esports degree, and I need to have a BS in esports management or esports business development. And like, that is actually, sometimes you're shooting yourself in the foot by doing that. One of the best things that I did was get a well-rounded degree that I can literally apply to anything, was able to get a job outside of the industry that I was super interested in doing, that then helped me get that job within the industry, because there are lots of people who want to come in and be like, I want to work in esports, and I want to do esports stuff. The esports industry needs people who can actually do jobs that are outside the industry. We need more business development people. We need more marketing people. We need more people who have done jobs outside the industry that can bring that knowledge into the industry. So yeah, I think that that's a super key point.
The advice we always, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. You got
All
it.
right. So the advice we always give to folks is that if you want a job in esports and you want to come in and talk about the passion that you have, you should be able to demonstrate it in some way. So, when when you take the test to go to law school, the LSATs, there's a problem solving piece of the LSATs, and it's the piece that most people hate. It's like long word and logic problems that you have to put together with, only a sheet of paper and a pencil, and you're trying to figure out, all right, Isabel wears a hat and goes to church on Friday, and Sam wears green pants and goes to the store on Saturday, and you're taking all these clues and trying to figure it out. And it turns out I really liked those problems, to the point where I used to sit around and find logic problems on the internet and do them, because it was like a nice way for me to relax. And I know that sounds crazy, but when 12 years later I applied for this job at Riot, and I came on board to run league operations. And for us, league operations, which is essentially like all the referees, all the competitive formats, all the rule books, all that stuff falls under league operations. The thing we look for at Riot is someone who can come in and do problem solving with very little structure. And it was something that I was super passionate about, because it was the thing I was doing as a hobby. So I came in for my interview with this, big binder where I could flip through, and it's like, hey, here's your current format, but if you tweak the format, here's what the standings would look like, and here's how some things would play out, and here's how I think the rule book, if you change this rule, like here would be some of the consequences. And I spent a lot of time thinking through it. We've had folks come in and talk about how they're running video game tournaments with their friends, or in their high school, or on Reddit or social media. We've had social media creators come in and be able to talk about the community they built around a pseudonym, or some interest that they had. So being able to walk in the door and say like, hey, I'm really interested in being a content creator. If you've never made content and you don't have something demonstrable to show, this is the passion I have, and here's the thing that I'm doing to explore that passion. It's hard to show us that you can actually do the job. And that's especially true in esports, where there's just not a lot of comparables, right? There's no, Zack works in player management and player development, and he spends time with pro players and looking at their social media accounts and their streaming numbers and figuring out how can we make our stars bigger, right? If you compare it to basketball, he's the guy who's sitting around, he's not too worried about LeBron, but he's looking at that up and coming basketball player, figuring, all right, how do we get them, how do we get their highlight videos out there? How do we get ESPN to talk about them more? And he's doing that work. There's no direct path to that. There's no minor league version of that. There's no other job you can do where it's like, all right, well, I've done this job. Now I'm prepared to go be a player management person in esports. But Zack was able to come in with a bunch of skills. He's showed us good with logic, good with numbers, can read statistics, can put charts together, right? It's those are the things that we started to look for, in addition to the people skills, being able to have conversations. So everyone keeps saying there's value in everything that you're doing. Sometimes that value is helping you figure out what you like to do. Like in my case, I like to do nerdy logic problems. But sometimes you're developing those soft skills, you like to organize information, or you like to put charts together. And those are all things that you eventually package up and can bring to someone and say, hey, you've got a job. And I think I'd be perfect for that job. And here's why. Here's the things that I've done in the past, or even the things I've done to prepare for this job interview, to show you that the skills that you want, I can demonstrate that I have.
Yeah, and if it's okay to jump in, one more thing to go on Greeley. So Greeley had mentioned came in with a binder of stuff, and for me, I interviewed for the player management job twice out of the 6 different positions that I had. The first time I came in with nothing. I literally sat down and was just like, I want the job. I'm super passionate. It was the second one that I interviewed for, and they gave me feedback afterwards. It was hey, we actually don't even know what you want to do when you come here. Player management is a super nebulous thing. You had no direction. And so when I came back the last time, I came in with a binder of stuff and essentially had a plan that never ended up getting used. And actually, because I had no idea what was going on at the league at that time, actually didn't make any sense. But I came in with a plan to get pro players that finish their careers, how to get them into a program to go to university and go to college, because most pro players don't end up doing that because they go pro before college. So I thought through this whole plan that was actually not great and didn't end up getting used at all. But just showing that when I came in that I could think through that kind of stuff, I think was a huge leg up and a huge thing that got me in through that door. Whereas the first time that I interviewed showed that I didn't really have that. I wasn't actually able to show that I had that ability to think that way. So that was something that I wish I would have known when I first went in. It was like, okay, this is something that could really help push me through, is coming for a job like that prepared with something that's like, hey, this proves that I can actually do this job and think this way.
That's great, Greg. If you want to start queuing up another question, I think you guys are making great points about kind of the way you approach things. It's the effort that really matters most. I think you're going to be wrong sometimes. You're going to be right, hopefully more than you're wrong. But if you show that you really care about being right, I think that's the first big step toward standing out and differentiating yourself. It's showing that you're willing to come in and put in that extra effort. I know it was already said in the chat here, and we had a big discussion about failure earlier, that you've got to be okay failing, but you've got to understand what failure can do for you in a positive way and how you can use it to grow and evolve. All right, Gregg, what do you have for us?
All right, here's another question from another camper. To all of you, what would you say has contributed the most to making LCS one of the biggest series in the world?
I'll take a stab at this. First, I think the fans of LCS are incredible, and really the fans' interest in the sport is what makes it the biggest esport in the world. I think that then there are combinations of what about it appeals to fans. And I think League of Legends, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, I'll just give you a TLDR or a short synopsis that this game is really the perfect game for expression of sport in a video game. The strategy involved, the competition involved, the teamwork involved. I've been a sports fan my entire life. I've worked in sports productions. Like, sports has been such a huge part of my life. And when I learned about League of Legends and the LCS, I didn't know about it at all. I'd never played it. I didn't know the game. And I can say safely that watching League of Legends played as a sport is my favorite sport at this point in my life. And yes, I'm associated with the product and I work on it, but the level of skill expression, the level of teamwork, the level of strategy that goes into the game gives League of Legends an inherent advantage over other video games that are played as sport. And I think there are other video games that are great as esports, but I think that League itself, in the competitive nature of the game, the strategy involved, really make it awesome. And then I think, like, the pros, the personalities in the scene are really exciting, as well as the on-air casting team that we have are incredible storytellers and really make it compelling. And they've been doing it for a while now and have helped build up the audience. But I think that the story involved in League of Legends being played at a very high competitive level, the mastery, the prestige of playmaking are the things that really make it compelling to an audience. And then the fans themselves, the passion level. I've been at big networks and I've been at big sports productions, but the level of engagement from LCS fans is like nothing I've ever seen, both on social mediums and other ways. The expression from the fans is huge, and that it's a two-way street. I think the communication between players, the pros, the casting team, are very highly engaged with the community, and that's something that is just very special and very unique. There are times when you can't take the good without the bad. Like, there are times when it can be very discouraging when some reactions to certain choices about broadcast, or I'm sure for pros about plays they make, can be very discouraging, but it's also very uplifting and rewarding the way that the community engages with the sport. And I think that that's like an incredible attribute of the sport that makes the LCS so big and so exciting.
Hey, Tone, not to put you on the spot. You spent a lot of time helping us tell stories about the league. Do you have anything to throw on to Dave's answer there?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things that's super interesting is that, especially about like League of Legends esports in general, is that it really spent a lot of time trying to build something organically off the community, right? And so it's not like League of Legends esports came out and was like, here's our 10-team system and here's the plan. It was like, man, these people just really like playing League of Legends and we're going to try to put together a sport, right? And that grew over time to like create these like huge event, like to create not just the LCS, but World and all these things, right? But that grew like with the fan base. And I think that's one of the reasons that League of Legends esports continues to exist, 10 years later is a lot of that, right? Is like following natural community interest and trying. And I think that's one of the things Riot does really well. And so to me, that's one of the reasons partnering with the amazing broadcast team and Dave and all those folks, right? And like being able to tell those stories is one of the reasons I think it is so large.
And to follow on just real quick on Tone's point, because I did see a question earlier about someone who wants to be a video game designer and a question about whether or not it's essential as a video game designer to include spectator tools to make it an esport as well. I do want to just say that like not all video games need to be esports. The way Tone described League of Legends becoming an esport was very organic. I think I've seen other games try to force the esport component and kind of fall on their face because there's not really a sport there. And so I think it's okay and it's a safe space to say, hey, we're making a video game that is for people to play and love and enjoy, and not say, how does this going to work into our esports plan? There may be like perfect synergies where a game is an esport, and if you can build on those early on in the process, there are advantages. But to follow on the question, I do think that even from a gaming perspective, there are nice advantages of having good spectator tools within, because gamers like to share awesome replays of their plays with others and say, look what I did. And so I think that there is a use for spectator technology even beyond esports, just in content generation for community sharing and things like that. But yeah, like not everything it needs to be an esport, and that's okay as far as game design.
Really, I'm fascinated by this, and I think I should have done this from the beginning. Chris, I want to come to you with a sort of high-level question, and then Griggs, I'm going to come back to you for another Q&A. Can you give us a sense of sort of the whole ecosystem of Riot Games, and as commissioner of the league, kind of what are all the different moving parts that you oversee, and how do all their roles fit together?
Yeah, Riot for a long time was, the official name is Riot Games, but we should have been Riot Game. We were just League of Legends. Over the past couple of months, Riot's put out a couple of different games. So we have Teamfight Tactics, which is part of the League of Legends client. We have Valorant, which is what Tone is working on now. And we have a card game called Legends of Runeterra. And all of them have esports components to them and all things that our team is working through. But as commissioner of the LCS, I oversee kind of all of the LCS is broken into three pieces. There's the publishing folks, like that's the team that Tone was on. They help us with our graphics, with our marketing, with our brand, with kind of the way that we present ourselves as a broadcast and as a league and the stories that we tell to the world. Dave's team oversees broadcast and content. So Dave's team is the one that fires up our broadcast every week. It includes the on-air talent. It includes all the graphics folks who work on broadcast, the technical directors, the producers, and they're the ones that are working through every week to help translate, the vision from publishing and the stories that are being told on stage by our players through their competition, pardon me, into the storylines that our fans get to see every week. In addition, all of the content that our teams are making. So we have weekly shows called, there's one called This or That. They're all generally like content pieces that talk about the league, the players, the games that are coming up, the games that happened. Dave's team oversees all of the hype videos that we have, all of the retrospective videos we have. Essentially, all of the content that we're pushing out, whether it's live broadcast or it's taped content, comes from Dave's team. And then my team does everything else. So Zack and player management is part of my team. Gregg on business development is part of my team. So we oversee all of the back office or front office capabilities for the league. We do the rules, the format, If people break the rules, we do the investigations and the discipline. We have the player management and player development function, so we're helping to grow our stars in conjunction with publishing and broadcast. Our sponsorship and business development team all sit in there, as well as our events team. So the one that, the team that runs our arena in LA, the one that puts on our road shows all over the United States, all those folks are in league management too. I guess like the sort of the overarching thing about our league or really any modern esports league is that there are so many jobs that could be transplanted from somewhere else. So our events folks all used to do events outside of esports. They were all production types. Some of them worked in TV or movies. Some of them worked in kind of theater or other live events. All of our back office people who are doing our accounting and our broadcast production management, they all did that stuff outside of the esports space. You know, the lawyers who work at Riot were lawyers in other spaces before they came over. Our finance people all worked somewhere else, and now they're doing finance and esports. And then when you look at Dave's team, you know, there's a lot of folks like Dave who were doing conventional sports and came over to esports. And Dave's team has spent a lot of time training kind of that first generation of esport broadcast professional who, you know, entered the broadcast team either doing graphics or something else, and are now producers and helping to run and produce our show every week. The other thing that my team does is we have 10 franchise teams in our league. So the way you look at the NBA or the NHL, you know, you have the same 25, 30, 32 teams, whatever it is, depending on the league. We have 10 teams in our league that all purchase their slots. And we work with those teams in the same way that, you know, the commissioner's office would in the NHL or the NFL to make sure that, you know, we're all working together to make the sport better, to promote it, to help it grow bigger. And then ultimately, if team owners have concerns about things that are going on, about changes that should be made, I help manage those pieces as well.
That's really interesting. It's fascinating to see how it all ties together, and then just how, honestly, how similar it is to conventional sports as you referred to them. It really is. I mean, esports has its entire industry underneath it. All right, Griggs, bring us back with another question.
Sure. Okay. This question is from a camper named Lucas. How do you decide on rules for the league in such a new sport and balance it with the broadcast as an entertainment piece? And then how flexible can it be as you learn new lessons through experiences in growing the esport?
Yeah, I think so. The guy who wrote our very first rule book back in 2012 or 2013 likes to tell the story that he collected 40 rule books from all sorts of sports, everything from Major League Baseball and professional football to competitive darts and you know, cricket and car racing, and went through all of them to figure out what should actually be in a rule book. The rule book has evolved a lot since then. It's been stripped down and rebuilt, but ultimately, you know, the underpinnings for any kind of rule set is to make sure that you're maintaining competitive integrity. People who play the sport should feel like the sport is fair, that there's not going to be some arbitrary rule or some arbitrary decision that's ultimately going to decide the game, and that the rules are creating that level playing field. At the same time, we spend a lot of time with Dave's team. You know, we have priorities when we go into those conversations, you know, and I think Dave and I share those priorities, that competitive integrity for us is always number one, but entertainment's important. And I think the best example of that, currently our format is best of one, right? It looks a lot like football, like the NFL. You're playing one game and the winner of that game wins and moves on, as opposed to best of threes, which is, you know, you play the first team to win 2 out of 3 games kind of wins the match. We've used both formats at various times, and I think everyone would objectively agree that a best of 3 series or a best of 5 or a best of 7, kind of as many games as you're willing to play, the more games you're willing to play, the more certain you can be about the outcome. So if we play checkers against each other 99 times, the person who wins the majority of those matches is probably the better checker player. Whereas if we only play once, you never really know, right? It's you. I could be a much better player than you, and you got lucky, or I screwed up, or something. So, in that situation, best of ones for our fans have just been a more entertaining product to watch. The games have more meaning. The games have more kind of a greater depth to them, and the time commitment for fans is easier for them to make. So in those situations, we've prioritized entertainment because we're still creating a fair product and a fair, competitive landscape for our teams with the best of one. But we are leaning into the fact that we need to be an entertainment product. We need to attract fans. Dave, I don't know if you've got a corollary to that.
No, I think that that's a really good answer. It's a balance, but I think that the audience, the audience wants that fairness, a fair level field of play. It's great to see a crazy upset based on a surprise tactic, but it's not great to see a crazy upset based on an unfair or a competitive disadvantage. And so the competitive integrity is something we always talk about as being number one. But there are a lot of times where the game design team is also working to make sure that the game is exciting and interesting, and not just for the players at home. They're balancing for the players, and they're also balancing for the high level esports, because there have been times, the game, unlike the NFL or NBA, our sport changes dramatically every 2 weeks, and there are new patches come in, items are adjusted, champions abilities are adjusted, and so coaching staffs have to be studying all the time to evolve and to get better. And so the game, is in a place where it's highly competitive and exciting and interesting, rather than slow games that stall out and don't have action. But then also the entertainment piece is kind of the storytelling that goes around it. There are going to be seasons where one team is just so much better than the other teams that the storylines become less compelling. And then there are times when there are several teams that are in the mix and are fighting, and it's up for grabs, and those can be more compelling. But really, it's about the sport, and about the sport having integrity, and then the entertainment comes in alongside, because competition excites people, and seeing excellence displayed at something that you love to play yourself is pretty awesome. And that's one thing that we always are striving to remember, is that when I watch the Super Bowl and Tom Brady, throws an amazing touchdown, I don't go outside. I might go outside and throw the ball, but I don't go outside and throw the ball thinking that I'm going to throw the ball 60 yards and be a badass. The same in League of Legends, where I also don't become magical after watching pros play, but I want to go play and try to play the champions that they play, and try to do a move that they do, or try to control dragons the way that they do. And there is an educational element where I can watch all the NFL all day long, and I'm not going to get better at football, but I can watch LCS and I can learn little things that make me better at League. And that's another component of the entertainment and education piece that goes into our storytelling.
That's a really interesting perspective. I appreciate that. So we have about just over 5 minutes left. Gregg, I'm going to have you queue up one more short question, and while he's looking for that, once this question gets answered, I'm going to have all 5 of you give parting words of advice. So one piece of wisdom that you would offer to a high school student now, that they can start thinking about what skill should they build, the number one skill, the number one thing they should study, the number one thing they should do now and over the next few years as they start to think about pursuing a career. So Gregg, let's go to you first.
Okay. This is a question from camper named Ashton. He says, can graphic design be integrated in the esports industry?
Yeah, I can take that one. Is that I think graphic design can totally be, is a huge part of esports and the stories that we tell. When I worked on the LCS, I got to work with a lot of amazing designers whose backgrounds were making the posters for movies, right? And all that kind of stuff, right? And they were just the most amazing designers. And it was a privilege to work with them, because every day they were getting to make stuff that went out into the world, that showed up on broadcast, that showed up on our social channels, and like, you know, like with Adobe and everything else, everybody can design stuff at home, right? But being able to like think about craft and how to build that over time, that's something that I think esports needs a lot more people that want to like come with their like design craft. And so if design is like, I mean, there's the meme of like graphic design is my passion, but like if it is like an actual like passion of yours, like this esports is an industry where teams, organizations, leagues desperately need that. And so if you happen to love both those things, I think there's like such a unique opportunity there for folks.
30 seconds each. Tone, since you're already live, let's go with you.
Sure. I think the best thing that a person can do, the best skill that they can develop is like grit and endurance. There's a lot of work that goes into getting to where you want to go. And sometimes it's just really hard. Like in college, I had to work 2 jobs to like pay for my college education. And there were times when, not times, a lot of times in college where it'd be like my friends were going out and I'd be going to my second job and then coming home to study. And I used to get really mad about that. And I think you can either get mad about that or realize that like it just teaches you to work harder, because then when you go out into the world and get a job, that's the thing that separated me from other people, was that I was willing to work harder. And so, yeah, it totally sucked that I wasn't able to have as much fun as like the rest of my like friends in college, but it gave me a lot. And so like the best advice I can have is like learn how to build that endurance to work, and don't compare yourself to other people. Other people may have better situations than you, but you can't let that like drag on you.
Gregg, you're on deck.
I think I hear the first part of it. I guess I'll go. Okay. My parting words of advice: focus and find an industry or something that you're passionate about. That was something that was extremely important to me. My motivation comes from being passionate about something, and so find something you're passionate about. But equally, if not more, focus on something that industry that you are passionate about needs, so that you can fill that need and have a much stronger case when you go to work in that industry. For me, I built business development skills and interpersonal relationship skills that I could then bring to player management, and then after that to business development. And so find something that, that industry specifically needs, focus on that, as well as building skills in that industry. And marrying those two together will make you set you up for success much more than your peers when you go to work in that industry.
Zack, you want to go next?
Sure. So for me, I guess the parting advice that I'd leave that I found really, really helpful when trying to get where I am now is just make sure to basically spend time exploring what you like and what your interests are and what kind of opportunities are out there. When I was spending time in college with my gaming club, that was just because I found it fun and I wanted to learn more about the different aspects of like running events and that sort of thing. And I had no idea that it would like lead to esports. And like, even when I was an intern at Riot, I spent most of my internship literally just asking people questions, being like, what do you do? What jobs exist? And I think there's a lot of stuff you can do online just around like research of different types of jobs and doing informational interviews and stuff like that. Those were all things that I did in college, and being able to like have a very clear idea and narrow down what my interests are and why I was interested in the jobs I was, made me be able to like really advocate strongly for the things that I was interested in when it came time to actually applying for those things.
Dave, what do you have for us?
I think my biggest advice around finding a career that you'll enjoy is being a good teammate and kind of finding a spirit of collaborative joy. I think joy is one of the most underrated qualities of success that I've experienced in the professional world. And if people see that you are having a good time and you are having fun, even in times of adversity, they're going to want to work with you and they're going to want to be your teammate and they're going to want to collaborate with you. And I think that, whether you're someone's boss or whether someone is your boss or the many other dynamics that you'll experience on teams, if you just treat everyone as a teammate that you want to help them succeed and help the product win, I think that you're going to have a lot of success. And I think that it's a quality that, I've enjoyed very much at Riot, is that I get to work with a lot of people that I value a great deal, and that I enjoy working with, and that I consider really valuable teammates, that I want to see them succeed, and I want to help them succeed, and I want to succeed with them and win together.
Last but not least.
I mean, you would say that. I think my teammates would say, say otherwise. So when I was a lawyer, I was a litigator. We used to go to court. We did all the arguing stuff, a lot of what it looks like on TV, except it's nowhere near that glamorous. And the woman I worked for was crazy smart, like maybe the smartest person I've ever worked with or for, with all due respect to my colleagues who are here. And I never understood why, every night, before we would go to court, she was in her office until 1 a.m, going over things, studying them, writing them, rewriting them, preparing. And one day she told me that there's no such thing as being prepared. You're either over-prepared or you're not prepared at all. And I would watch her go into court and just absolutely demolish people. Not because, she was better than them anyway, but she was so well prepared. She knew everything backwards and forwards. There was nothing you were going to ask her that she couldn't speak on, as if she had made it up herself. And I've tried to take that with me. And, you heard my story of my, me getting the job at Riot, coming in with a binder, and Gregg coming in with a binder and spending time preparing for it. And when we're on the hiring side, it's what I look for when people come in. If you can't talk, even if you've never played League of Legends, you've never watched the LCS, when you put that job application in, you need to go and start watching and start understanding it. If you come in and it's like, oh, I don't know, esports sounds cool, like I've already moved on in the conversation. Like, people who come in and have clearly spent a lot of time preparing, whether it's in a job interview, whether it's in a meeting, when it's me and these guys sitting in a room, or something else. People who spend the time to prepare are simply more confident, have more to offer, and ultimately, I think, get better results.
We are out of time. I want to thank you guys all very much. I think this was incredible, and we appreciate this. And Chris, thank you for putting it all together. To the attendees, remember to check out all the assignments for your Career Explorer, the Career Explorer Pass program. There are scholarships to be won at the end of this. This session will be recorded and it's sent out to everyone, so you guys can watch it again later if you want to pick up some tips again. That being said, just thank you all. We'll see you at 4 o'clock for the all-team meeting.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.